All right. So, in Guatemala, you may have known, a couple days ago, the Congress was literally set on fire. And so I've got a thread here from a Twitter user, Sandra Koof. Now, again, I am not huge on foreign policy. This might not be a great source. All of that stuff is possible. But I'll take this over nothing. This is like the best source that I could find. That gave the most like longest kind of explanation. So they have an article here. But I want to scroll down here to the video portion. This is my favorite part. This is my favorite part. Like, look at this. They've got a literal guillotine. Not like a make-believe guillotine. Not like one made of cardboard. One made of actual board. Very good stuff. Very good stuff. I just want to say absolute solidarity with international protests. I love to see it. Right, you go here. Oh, baby. Oh, baby. And they're taking out, like, the precious artwork and just kind of destroying it. That's a good touch. That's a good touch. But yeah, so the Guatemalan Congress building is literally on fire. There were massive protests. And you might be wondering why these protests are going on. That's what I was wondering. Now, again, I don't know much about Guatemala. I could be, reporting wrong information. I could be doing all of that. So if that is the case, if you live in Guatemala and you want to reach out to me, I am more than willing to have a conversation. I would love that, actually. But so I saw these videos circulating on Twitter, and I was like, what's going on? Right, there's riot police. The Congress is on fire. So we got an article here from Al Jazeera by the person who made the Twitter thread, and it seems to give us a decent background. And so I'm just going to read this article here. So why are people trying to set the Congress on fire? Let's read. So, protesters set part of the Congress of Republican of Guatemala building on fire Saturday after a controversial budget bill brought a series of long-simmering crises to a boiling point, spurring anti-government demonstrations. So, thousands of people took to the city and town squares around the country with demands ranging from a presidential veto of the budget bill and prosecution of corruption to resignations across all branches of government and the Constitutional Assembly. Now, I don't know much about the government of Guatemala, but I am assuming, after reading a lot of these situations and seeing the outrage, that the government is not good. Not good, okay? So, and instead of protecting the government's people, they're trying to cut themselves some more checks. This is one thing that actually happened where I live. Where I live, during the pandemic, right, the government kind of shut down and closed. They reopened for a 12-hour period in the middle of the pandemic where I live. They voted and unanimously passed a bill to give themselves all a pay boost, and then they shut government down again. So that's something that literally happened in where I live in bumfuck southern USA. So throwing that out there, really funny stuff. But also it's not funny because there's people starving. So, we're tired of corruption, Carla Figueira, a 51-year-old professional translator, told Al Jazeera at a rally in Guatemala City's Central Plaza, where she held a sign calling for the resignation of 125 of the country's 160 legislators. It doesn't matter which government, they're all the same. Guatemala's Congress passed the budget bill Tuesday night, increasing lawmakers' own stipends for meals and other expenses and cutting funding for human rights programs and the judiciary. They also axed $25 million destined to combat malnutrition, igniting nationwide outrage. And by the way, $25 million is not, that is a very large sum of money, especially when you're dealing with a country like Guatemala, which is not it's not giant, I deliver American news. So when we talk about news in America, 25 million does not sound like a lot if you're going to divide it across the whole country. But that's because the USA is relatively big, right? So $25 million is actually a huge deal. And the idea that the Congress would just, I want to have some extra lunches. I want to have like a third dinner on Sunday. So, fuck it. Fuck it. While Congress passed the budget at breakneck speed in the capital, rains from Tropical Storm Iota were flooding regions already devastated when Hurricane Eta swept through Central America earlier this month. Thousands remain in shelters, some of which have confirmed cases of COVID-19. More than 100 indigenous villages were buried in landslides in several regions after the storm, and subsequent crops were destroyed across vast swaths of the country. Guatemala has one of the world's highest rates of chronic malnutrition, and the hurricanes have exacerbated hunger for many. The funding cut affecting malnutrition was the last straw. Calls for protests grew, as did widespread demands that President Alejandro Giammattei, veto the budget bill. When he did not, Vice President Guillermo Castillo said Friday that he had called on Guatemala. Please forgive me, okay? I have dyslexia. This is very hard for me. I'm a white person, please. He called on the president to join him in resigning for the good of the country. Before the protests began Saturday, the president said he would meet with various sectors and present proposed reforms to the budget in the coming days. But that did not curb the demonstrations. I think this is just the beginning, said Floria Salguero, 48 years old, of the more than 1,000 people who arrived in Guatemala City's plaza well ahead of the set protest start time. Salguero said she wants the president and the legislators who passed the budget bill to resign. We are tired of the theft. I don't want my kids and grandkids to live in such an indebted country, she told Al Jazeera. Congress blaze, right? 4 blocks away, a university student-led march on its way to the plaza had stopped and set up a guillotine outside the Congress building. Good stuff. A few dozen police in regular uniforms stood by and watched as young men climbed the building, kicked in windows, and threw in incendiary devices. Flames and smoke shot out of the windows for several minutes as protesters destroyed framed photographs of politicians. Riot police showed up, tear-gassing the crowd, and then firefighters arrived to put out the blaze. Francisca Hernandez was unfazed. The 65-year-old self-employed piñata saleswoman was not participating in the protest, but had walked up to a nearby corner to see what was going on. They're leaving us without anything to eat, she told Al Jazeera, referring to the congressional representatives who passed the budget bill. Hernandez said she did not agree with the property destruction because people would ultimately end up paying for it. She said she does not want the president to resign, but to veto the budget bill and stand up to Congress. What we want is not to move backwards, she said. And then here's one last testimony. Byron Garcia sold many protesters the Guatemalan flags they carried to the protest. A street vendor, he has been selling face masks during the pandemic, but switched to flags and noisemakers on Saturday. He told Al Jazeera that he opposed the budget bill and government corruption too. It affects everybody, he said, but especially us poor people have to work every day to survive. So, not good, folks. Not good going on in Guatemala. And there's a lot of people there's a lot of opinions on, should we set the Congress on fire? Now, if the Congress were not set on fire, there's a good chance I would not have caught wind of this story. Now, could you say that that's better or worse? I'm not sure. But the whole reason why I found this was because they set the Congress on fire, because that is a huge symbolic gesture that gets a lot of international media. So I definitely in solidarity with the protesters in Guatemala and corruption all across the world. It's incredible to believe, actually, that the world we're living in right now, there's a global pandemic and a global depression, right? And almost every country is just saying, fuck it. Let's see what we can steal. They don't really realize the historical impetus of the moment that they're in. They think today's just another Tuesday. But most people, it's not another Tuesday. More and more people are getting involved. It's actually Monday. But more and more people are getting involved in politics. More and more people are educating themselves in politics. Social media is making sharing things like this. It's like all around the world, people knew that the Congress building of Guatemala was on fire within minutes. The whole world knew. And that's an incredible messaging tool. So again, I think that the aristocrats of the world, all across the world, I think that they don't quite understand the shifting era that we are finding ourselves in, that we have been finding ourselves in for the last at least 5 years. But it's definitely accelerating. And it's It's going to be interesting, and we need some of that high energy in the United States, I would say. We definitely need some more high energy in the United States. So, again, good stuff.